Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to DMW Group's Leeds Digital Festival webinar on implementing business strategy at pace. For those that don't know us, we're DMW Group. We deliver complex business-critical IT transformation projects for our clients, and we collaboratively accelerate modern changes for organisations. We've over 30 years' experience covering advisory, delivery, engineering and business transformation engagements. And we have deep technical knowledge of cloud, data and digital, and that is applied to everything that we do. For today, there are two speakers, so myself, Mark Hall, and I head up transformation within DMW. My colleague Will Try will also be presenting later on in the presentation. And to manage the Q&A, we have a colleague, Rob McHugh, who will be looking after the questions as we go through the webinar today. Before we get going, just some basic housekeeping. So we're really keen to get your questions at the end. So please post the questions on the Q&A function as we go through the presentation. You will see that on the right-hand side of your screen. And remember at the end also to provide us feedback about what we thought about the session today, and potentially win £100 worth of Amazon vouchers. Also conscious of the current situation with home networking, so apologies in advance if any network challenges hit the webinar today. Thank you. Okay. So implementing business transformation at pace is all about transforming your organisation to deliver the objectives that you have in the digital age. And as George Westerman at MIT Sloan said, when digital transformation is done right, it's like a caterpillar turning into a butterfly. But when done wrong, all you have is a really fast caterpillar. Now, transformation is difficult. We know that, but it is necessary. And if you think about the market that you operate in today, there are disruptive startups equipped to get to market probably faster than you can yourselves. And they present a real threat to incumbents who perhaps in many ways still map their business plans along lengthy decision paths with predefined outcomes with lots of checkpoints and permissions, taking many of the traditional controls of an organisation and slowing up your ability to react. From a customer standpoint, their expectations are growing exponentially. If you think about just all the experiences we all have in our everyday life, the use of technology we have, the simple things we can do on our phones, the ability to just at a click of a button get the information that you need. Well, these expectations that people have and all these experiences people have in their everyday life, they're now expecting from all of their providers, all the businesses that they want to work with. So just because they can do that on Netflix or on Amazon, they would expect the same treatment from yourselves. And those challenges are just getting harder and harder to meet. So organisations that are able to meet those needs are going to be successful. The startups that are emerging that are scaling quickly and managing to build this are the ones that will succeed. So pace is absolutely crucial to your success. Now, this is hard. Yeah, it's hard to make this sort of change, but it is worth doing. Organisations that grasp these new technologies and these ways of working faster are going to be much better placed to take advantage of the opportunities in the marketplace, and they're going to gain market share. And as McKinsey said in their quarterly, in that dynamic of value creation and durable competitive advantage, delivering digital services and operations has emerged as a prime mover in reshaping customer experience in almost every sector. So we see that the ability to implement these digital services, is being that primary driver, is shaping that customer experience, and it's what's keeping the customers happy today. So getting this right is absolutely worth it.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hi. Hi, I'm William Try and I'm a managing consultant, as Marcus has mentioned, with DMW Group. And my specialism is in business architecture and defining business change that can work and implementing it at pace. So, as we've remarked, digital transformation is difficult, it's necessary, and it's worth it, but it is hard to get right. So how do we think we might go about doing that, and what are the tools and techniques that we might advocate that will help execute a digital transformation at pace? Well, the first point really that we need to recognise is that organisations are at different starting points. So some may be at a point where they're able to set out a business plan or a strategy, and they're setting out what they need to do and how they need to get to the outcome, and whether that's differentiation amongst their customer base, whether it's improving customer service, implementing new regulatory demands. It requires clear thinking and an evaluation of where the organisation currently is to set the strategy and be clear about the outcomes that are needed. If an organisation is able to do that up front, it's a critical enabler to get things right further down the track, because you can anchor and root your change in something that's clear. Other organisations may be at a point where they're aligning vision and objectives to a pre-existing business plan or pre-existing commitments that have been made. Perhaps more challenging, but we should recognise that there's an opportunity to reset and to integrate what you're trying to do at the moment with that overarching business plan, because there is no point in setting up initiatives in sort of left field sort of contexts without recognising the fact that the organisation is already committed to some change programmes. And delivery may be in flight. So you may have a programme of work, you may have multiple programmes, or an agile product management capability that's delivering business value to customers, and that may already be in train, and you're layering further demands on that. So I think we need to recognise that organisations are in slightly different places depending on where you are and what the demands are, and the extent to which those programmes are being executed are influenced by a few factors. So some internal factors. The first is whether agile methods are being adopted by the organisation. They may be fledgling, they may be partially adopted, but it's worth continuing that work. It may be the case that product management disciplines are already well advanced for a sector or a segment of your business, potentially the online channel, potentially some parts of your business, but not the whole organisation. Recognising that allows us to then plan our way forward with whatever change initiatives need to take place. The other point to recognise is the external factors and influences on the organisation will be driving that pace and driving certain constraints. So new regulatory demands and compliance needs surface throughout delivery, and it's no good kind of architecting something that is sound from the beginning but then can't be changed midway through in flight. Equally, as Marcus has remarked, emerging competitors are scaling very fast, and the landscape is being disrupted continuously, whether by competitors or by external events such as the healthcare situation and emergency that we're in at the moment. So there can be needs where the organisation needs to respond to change and pivot very quickly to be able to implement other change initiatives. So that's why we'll advocate some techniques here that are quite fit for purpose in terms of being lightweight, fit for purpose and appropriate in scaling for what the organisation needs to do. So we see organisations at these different starting points, and they typically have one or many of these challenges that I'll just illustrate to you. So it could be that the organisation has so many competing priorities and change agendas that it's just hard to get started. You're looping on a number of initiatives or requirements, and it's a case of which fire to fight first, or which initiative to start first of all. This can certainly be observed by sometimes a lack of clarity on overall business case or the value of what you're doing or why you're doing it. If that isn't anchored and clear to all team members, then sometimes organisations can ebb and flow, and the organisation may not be necessarily clear on exactly what they're trying to deliver. The second point is around how to be certain that we're on track to achieve outcomes. So we may have had a clear prioritisation of the work. We may know what needs executing, but it might be at the point where we're struggling to deliver and struggling to be sure and justify that if we take these actions and make these interventions that will deliver the value that we're expecting to and keep the commitments that we might have made at the start. So this can sometimes result in unclear or mixed messaging. Sometimes silo working is a symptom that we're in this situation, or just overall that there's low delivery confidence of executing and being on plan and being ready to deliver the outcome. It could be some organisations have a challenge around change taking too long, and this manifesting itself as what I term a long cycle time to implement. So at one point in time we were clear, we were set fair on a plan, and we were about to deliver. But something has intervened in the interim, and we're now fledgling and potentially not going to achieve the outcomes that we may have committed at the start because so much time has elapsed. So that can manifest itself as a failure to meet the objectives, which have timed out in a way, or some rescoping of initiatives that can then be resulting in a duplication of effort because one initiative was thought to tackle certain needs and then it didn't. So there's potential increased lead time to assess and implement and impact assess change, and we get into a situation where it's very difficult to see that we're on a course to achieve the outcome. The next symptom is potentially that we are going to produce deliverables or technical changes or business process changes that we think will work, but there's an inability or a lack of confidence about that change sticking. So the introduction of the service or of the product and the change may not be confident in execution. So this could manifest itself as reverting to old ways of working, to potentially not delivering the benefit. So we've delivered the product or the specific change, but we might not be about to deliver the benefit, and the program may be abandoned or may have less confidence in it because of that in delivery. And the final point is around, we can do all those things, but if we don't have an agile mindset, as we term it, then we're pursuing some certainties, and we're pursuing things that were right at the last baseline, but not necessarily right now. And it's going to take a long time to impact assess any future change or any future reprioritization of work. So pursuit of certainty and absolutes is sometimes masking the fact that the organisation isn't necessarily in an agile fashion ready to take on and implement that change. So it sometimes manifests as channel separation. So the web channel may be being handled in a particular fashion with a product management ethos or a service management ethos. Product owners may exist, but some of the legacy estate may be being managed in a completely different way. That causes complication when you're then trying to implement change that truly helps customer experience across all of those channels, for example. So a number of challenges there, but what do we think, given those scenarios, are the likely things we could do and we would advise you do to make sure that we can be more confident about executing the original outcome we were trying to seek? So the first point is to have a clear strategy. So whether it was previously defined or whether it needs amendment and clarity of vision, to be really clear on what the business success goals are for improvement, for survival, for the customer service improvement, whatever the particular outcomes you're looking for, to have that really clear and set out so that it's responsive to what's going on in the organisation and the marketplace, because it may be that that gets reset from time to time. The second point is, how can we be clear that we may have a strategy, we may have a vision, we may have certain things we need to achieve, increase customer satisfaction scores, we may need to reduce cost, we may need to increase effectiveness. We can have those goals, but how can we be sure that the interventions we're planning can meet those outcomes? And how can we be, firstly, clear on that from the outset, but secondly, how can we maintain that vision that we know that over time we're not diverging, we're not going into a situation where the intervention we're pursuing or the change we're making is not actually going to deliver that benefit. So to get an architecture viewpoint that is fit for purpose, that is not something that's right once, but right throughout the endeavour, is really valuable, because you can then start to see the cause and effect and track it throughout the delivery through to implementation. The third point is about execution. You need to have your standards and tooling really clear for the delivery teams. It may be a hybrid environment where some organisational units may be more comfortable working in Agile, others may not. So it's something where you need a baseline and a clarity of, these are the standards that we're expecting to execute on. And again, being lightweight about that and having responsibility for those standards embedded within delivery teams, as we'll come on to describe, will help the likelihood of that execution being successful. The fourth point is about change leadership. So this is really being clear with stakeholders throughout the delivery lifecycle about what the changes are planning to make happen, and to empower stakeholders so that they can truly take that on and improve that service ongoing from there, so that you've got a situation where you're handing something off and empowering people to truly own the change and own the delivery of the benefit into business as usual. And finally, you've got to have an agile mindset going about this, because with the cycle times as they are, with the implementations as requiring such significant change in many organisations, you've got to be responsive to what's going on around you. And we see there's certain tools and techniques you can use around having an agile mindset that will help you deliver that benefit. So given those scenarios and given those tools that we've got, there are certain things that we think would be useful to talk through and just go into a little bit more detail. And the first of those is strategy, as Marcus will describe.
Okay, so aligning your change agenda to the strategy is absolutely fundamental to success. And perhaps the best way of demonstrating this is through some examples. So if you think perhaps about what is the most famous change program of all time, well, to me it has to be JFK's ambition strategy to send a man to the moon. Or if you think about something more recent, you take something like Elon Musk, his visions to change our view in terms of electric vehicles or space exploration. Those organisations had a clear direction set. It was set from the front. Everyone knew what they were doing, and they were 100% focused on it. And it doesn't matter how grand your own individual visions are for your programs. Hopefully, you can relate to those famous examples and think about how they've anchored the change in the future and what they're trying to achieve. And if you're able to align the organisation behind that strategy, then you're far more likely to succeed. If you think about your organisation, is your change agenda aligned to those outcomes? And if not, what do you need to do to get that alignment? In our experience, you want to establish that clear vision and you want to work towards it. You want to make sure that there's a business case for the change, and everyone understands the value that it's going to drive and the part that they will play within that change. You want to be clear and have some measurable outcomes that support that business case. And you want to use those outcomes as success criteria for the program, the teams, and the overall change agenda. And we observe that where there is that clear vision and where that is communicated, it sets the expectations for all those teams, and it focuses people on that success. And it also reduces the likelihood of scope creep, so people do focus on the ultimate goal that you're looking to achieve. We work with organisations to do this, and for one leading utility provider, we help them with their strategy and to ensure that their transformation agenda was aligned behind that business objective. And we worked with the organisation's senior stakeholders to agree on and set a course that helped them to prioritise and reach a position of clarity for their programme.
Okay, one of the ways in which we establish that clarity and maintain it is through architecture methods. So we can have a set of outcomes that are specified and defined. They may change and need amendment over time, but we need an architecture of the business and of the overall enterprise to be clear about the cause and effect of the changes we're making. So it's essential to plan and manage change into the organisation using some methods in this space. It's absolutely essential to firstly establish it, then maintain it throughout the delivery. But I guess the first question is, do we even understand our starting points? Do we understand the current capabilities of the organisation? It's really important to map out what we have already and do this in a fit for purpose manner. So this isn't kind of a large effort that's kind of signed off right at one point in time and then never revisited and one set of artifacts. But it's a fit for purpose, fairly lightweight set of diagrams or views that just summarise the capabilities for your business in the different domains. So whether it's what services are you providing to customers, how are you providing those services in terms of the breakdown of processes, of the people you're using, the facilities or locations that you may be using, the technology that underpins that, and the data that you're gathering and using and achieving outcomes using all those different artifacts. So when trying to put that together, it will help select the right interventions and be clear about, if I change X, then I'll get Y outcome. And you can, at a very early stage, understand whether it's likely to either A, cut across any existing pieces of work that you've got in flight at the time, B, you can understand whether any of your projects conflict that you're about to initiate or you're about to start, and how to recognise value from your existing product or service management structures that you may already have. You may already have SMEs that can help you get to the outcome that you need. But by having that clear view, you'll understand exactly what you've got in the current stock of your organisation. So it's also useful to do this, to select the right interventions. So you can then be clear, if I take these projects, I've mapped out a potential, if I did X, if I did Y, and you can then select the package of measures or interventions or change projects that you're going to undertake. So that's massively helpful, and it helps you to recognise that value early on, rather than spending money on an innovation or a step change to your business that may actually not achieve the outcome that you want, or be cut across before it manages to achieve that. I've mentioned that where different change activities that may already be in flight in the organisation affect a capability, you can flag that up, and it's really easy to do so. You can then be clear on understanding, and also be clear between programs or projects about dependencies and how those relate to each piece of work that you've got underway at the time to achieve the outcome. And you can start to recognise early on what is likely to happen as you go through a delivery cycle. So there's a bunch of things that you could do there. And if you're trying to implement multiple change initiatives in short succession, having this clear map allows you to be responsive. It allows you to impact assess change that's being layered on top of change in a fairly easy way, and has artifacts underpinning it that, whilst they have integrity, they're fairly lightweight and fit for purpose. So you can make value judgments then about whether a project is necessary, if it's already being similar to a scope of something else elsewhere, and it will also allow you to see whether you're getting best value out of that delivery, and how to optimise the portfolio or reach the outcome in fewer steps potentially. So the architecture view will flush out those dependencies, gaps in scope potentially, where each project or initiative or product owner thought that they were achieving something and actually it was with someone else. And it can flush out those interdependent pieces of work and get you to have a real clarity of sight up front, very shortly after defining the vision and outcomes. So ultimately, the question you're asking throughout all of that is, are the capabilities, if I change them in the way that I'm planning to change them, are they going to be ready? Are they going to deliver the outcome that I need? So we see that there are certain things that are key ingredients to getting there. Firstly, is a clear view or map of the current capabilities of the organisation. And as I say, that doesn't have to be a heavyweight exercise, which takes a long time and is signed off once. It can be something that's fairly lightweight and accessible. Here's a sample of a business capability matrix, which just looks through some potential pieces of work that you might have underway. So in this example here, it's a very simplistic example, but if we were changing the overall business in certain ways, perhaps here a new stock inventory management system and supply chain processes are being introduced, and an analyst role is being created. The product catalogue for this logistics exercise here, the product catalogue of what's available is being upgraded. So there's an upgraded application there, and a product SME is being accessible via a web chat, is being supplemented into what's happening, and the current fulfillment processes and dispatch application is being retired because that's been outsourced to someone else. So in this example, you can start to see what you're doing, color code those projects and programs, and see if any future change would impact those same relationships or those same commitments that you've got in the portfolio. So we're talking about something that, if you had an as-is view of your current capabilities, a clear view of what future capabilities you need, what you need to prepare for, including and not forgetting an ongoing capability to make that change, whether that's through a product owner or whether that's through a delivery capability. You can then obviously chart the progress between the two, and you can keep those up to date in flight. So whether you do that through tooling, simple diagrams like the one we've just looked at, or whether you do that through tooling such as Jira or Archimate or other tools, it's what's appropriate and fit for purpose for the size of program and the size of the undertaking you're making. we've talked about the fact that will allow you then to map the projects and kind of heat map what's going on in your organisation, and clarity of accountability is much easier to see in that manner. You can see how the cause and effect in your organisation is going to work in that change portfolio. And finally, it's an accessible view of information. So it's not something that is burdensome for too many folk in the organisation. It's something that you can use as a relevant, in-context view to help decision making. And ultimately, if it's relevant and if it's fit for purpose and used often, that's the most valuable type of architecture asset. So we see that that's key in order to enable the outcomes. One other point that's really essential is that we're clear on architecture, we're clear on what it's going to take in terms of interventions that need to be made, but it also is then really important to follow up with execution that's fast-paced, well-governed, and clarity of accountability and clarity of standards being applied. So we observe that a product portfolio and program plan needs to be in place and have clear accountabilities about whether you're working in an agile fashion or whether you're working in a more traditional waterfall fashion. But it's absolutely key that to implement those outcomes at pace, you need to be able to execute that change according to a set of standards that all stakeholders in your delivery team are clear on. As we've noted, an organisation may have pre-committed programs. It may have a product management capability, or it might be in the process of adopting Agile, but we've got to be clear on the delivery methods we're using, which execution or implementation it's following, which standards. We also think that establishing clear accountabilities for the different deliveries is paramount to drive pace, progress, and certainty of outcome. Got to be clear about who owns what. And I would go so far as to recommend that responsibility is also embedded within architecture roles as well. So having architects who have some delivery ownership or delivery responsibility keeps them close to the context of the change that they're making and keeps the standards and the application of principles and governance relevant to the delivery you're making. Separating the two sometimes is not the best way forward. So having a measure of accountability in the architects that are actually in the delivery is actually quite essential to making progress. So we need to be clear and respond to future changes and disruption appropriately. So we're in execution mode, we have our heads down, but we don't need to be taken off course unless it's going to deliver business value. And being able to understand this quickly, as we've talked about in the heat map exercise previously, being able to understand that quickly of what's going to take us off course from achieving an outcome is really important to understand in very short timescales. So some of us might have experienced long impact assessment timescales where it's difficult to see what you're trying to actually impact assess because you haven't got a view of what's there already. So having that upfront investment in a relatively modest architecture view of what the organisation can do at the time and keeping that up to date is really well worth having to reduce the cycle time of implementing changes. So the ability to govern the architecture with a fit-for-purpose forum is as valuable at this stage in implementation as it is in terms of progress tracking of a Gantt chart or of Jira tickets. Planning activity and having insight rooted in the architecture methods and from the product owner is going to move things forward at pace. It's going to reconcile different interdependencies. It's going to understand the context that you're in much quicker, and you're going to avoid unintended diversions from the course you're on, and you're going to be able to stay on track. So the key question that we're trying to answer here is: are we on track to deliver the intervention as we planned to? And it's really important that if we can keep ourselves honest to the set of principles and standards that we set, we're really clear about the way in which the architecture has been governed through the change cycle, and we've embedded some element of delivery responsibility to architecture roles, we think you're much more likely to achieve the outcome that you need to achieve. So we've helped, we have experience of this, and we've helped a major oil and gas provider to align their delivery techniques to enable them to drive change internationally in very, very fast timescales, and we've seen that be very successful.
So for change to be successful, it must be led from the front. and everyone impacted must effectively feel engaged and committed to the change that's about to take place. I think perhaps the best way to try and articulate this is a current example that we're all experiencing. So if you think about the challenges we all face today with COVID, this is a global challenge, and different national leaders are reacting in different ways. So it's a great example of change leadership in action. So where is it most successful? Well, in my mind, change leadership is best demonstrated where the change is being led from the front, and adoption of the changes is most evident where that clear change agenda is set out up front, it's clearly articulated by the leader of a country, and it's reinforced by experts and other leaders at sort of a local level to reinforce and to drive the message home, and it's repeated over and over again. So what you're seeing is a very clear change agenda, a very clear ask, and repetition of that. And that's just the same if you're driving a change within your organisation. You have to be razor sharp with the message, and you have to repeat it over and over again. And what you don't want is your leadership or key stakeholders going off message, because what does that do? That simply creates confusion, and it provides space for dissent in terms of the change that you're trying to drive. For your change benefits to be maximised, you've got to truly engage your stakeholders, and you've got to build that capacity to adopt change within your organisation. So if you think about your organisation, are you leading change from the front? Are you maximising the impact that you can have, and can you trace back to the outcome that you're trying to achieve? And are people involved clear of what that is? In our mind, and if you're going to be successful, you do need to prepare the organisation for the change, and that does come from the top. You need to understand why and how the organisation needs to change. You need to repeat that message. You need to have a clear strategy, a clear plan, and you have to have a view in terms of what's changing. What does it mean for the individual? What will change with their individual ways of working? What are the new behaviours that are required? How do you upskill your staff? How are you going to go through and train them, and how do you prepare them? And how do you reinforce that change on an ongoing basis as you move forward? As you go through a journey as well, you've also got to make sure that the appropriate people are empowered to make decisions at the right level. You can't flow all decisions to the top. Take decisions where the information resides, and that often means pushing some of the day-to-day decisions down to the appropriate level, and a lot of organisations feel uncomfortable with that. So it's really important to make sure that everyone is empowered, and that everyone has a clear view of how that change will affect them. And perhaps by way of an example, we worked with one of our clients in the airline industry to articulate their strategy and vision for a digital transformation, and then we designed with them and implemented the business change plan. Okay, the next point that we want to consider is that of the agile mindset. And in a market that is crowded by digital innovators, having an agile mindset is absolutely crucial if you're to retain that competitive edge. The historic ways of thinking are no longer applicable to the workplace. If you want to change at pace, then you have to shift. You have to shift to how you think and how the organisation operates. This shift must be from the immovable project change that I spoke about earlier to lean iterative delivery techniques, and that requires top-down governance to be delegated to become, or top-down governance to shift delegation of authority down to the front line. It will affect your finance processes. So the traditional robust multi-year budgets where everything is clear up front don't apply. You need much more flexible funding methods that support the continuous innovation and the trial sort of concept, so that you can see what's happening and react rapidly to what's changing in the marketplace. And you have to work much more cross-functionally. You know, the traditional departmental silos must be broken down. You've got to create true cross-functional working, and you've got to empower those cross-functional teams. You've got to allow them to self-organise, self-manage. And the C-suite must transform their mindset. You know, leaders have to recognise that those closest to the product are often best equipped to make the immediate decisions. And that's the best way of delivering the outcomes that your customers want now and rapidly, and not the ones perhaps that the organisation thought it was going to be delivering 2 years ago. And that's a big shift. You know, it's a big release of control for people. It takes time to get that shift in the mind right. But when organisations achieve it, then instead of trying to think through just a small number of brains, you engage the whole organisation to achieve the outcomes you're looking to achieve. So if you think about your organisation, you know, and whether do you think that you can deliver at pace from that customer point of view? And if not, perhaps think about some of the, you know, the points that we're making here, what we think would enable you to be successful. So think about, you know, empowering your stakeholders in the organisation, giving everyone clear roles, delegating that authority. Make sure that the customer is represented in your thinking, and it should act, you know, as you're developing your new products and your solutions, think about their needs and think about it being a still thread, if you like, that runs right through the deliverable. You know, what is it you're trying to achieve for them? Is it going to work? And if it doesn't work, what action are you going to take to make sure that it does work for them? Because frankly, if you don't make the change, the customers will. You know, they get very fed up these days and move on far faster than, you know, we would ideally like as organisations. Also recognise that you may not have all the expertise and talent within the organisation to drive the change. So where are those gaps and where do you best get it from? So work out the right partners to have, and that could be from a product technology perspective, but it could also be from a skills perspective. And then finally, to think about, you get to market as fast as you can, deliver viable products, and then continuously learn, refine, and adapt. Don't wait for the Rolls-Royce solution, because the market will be gone. You know, the competitors will have stolen the marketplace. And perhaps, you know, again, for an example of our work in these areas, we worked with one of our government clients. And we defined the shift required in their mindset to take them from these traditional ways of working to an agile mindset, and what was required of their leaders and staff to support the empowerment and the decision making to succeed in the digital age.
Okay, so we've looked at a number of techniques there and a number of considerations. And what they do is they try to address a number of the challenges we've observed when undertaking digital transformations and trying to execute quickly. In combination, those things can help you avoid those challenges, and we've helped clients to deliver successful outcomes in many of the situations that we talked about earlier. It's a combination of those things that, if you apply them in a fit-for-purpose fashion, will then allow you to progress from your starting point, whatever that may be in the life cycle, to then apply the techniques and proven approaches that will allow you to be more certain of delivering an outcome at pace, and to be more confident in execution and moving that execution on in a more consistent fashion. So we've talked about a number of ways to do that. So just in terms of some closing thoughts and closing remarks before we talk through some questions potentially, just want to summarise really a number of the things we think are the key differentiators that will help you get to that implementation basis that's more solid, stable, and more likely to succeed. The first point is around having a clear and well-defined strategy up front that you can then link and anchor interventions to. So having that, whether it's something that's pre-existing and made more clear, or whether it's something that is drawn up for the first time or recognised across or rationalised across a number of products or portfolios, having that is really essential to get started and to have that clarity of thought. The second point is around architecture. I've mentioned that it's absolutely key to establish and then maintain a sense of direction and priority amongst your projects and programs and product developments. Having the right level of detail of information at the right time, being responsive to the needs of the business, that's what's required to get the job done there. So if your business needs to pivot very quickly, having a basis of information that's fit for purpose and appropriate, and that has buy-in from all the relevant stakeholders, is then really powerful to help you to execute change. Then the third point is around that execution point. So specifically having delivery standards that allow you to govern and monitor the delivery throughout its life cycle, or throughout the delivery trains, having those in place that are very, very clear and people have their remit very well defined is very helpful and more likely to succeed. And that point around keeping the architecture close throughout execution. So having governance points that really do get down into a bit more of the contextual detail about how you're changing processes, how you're changing the organisational's DNA, whether that's technology, whether that's through business functions or people, skills gaps, whether it's data. Getting to that level of conversation quite quickly and readily will help you then to move and to respond to what the marketplace is doing and to stay on course in execution. Then obviously it's key to have the change leadership skills that are in place so that you can then empower stakeholders, be clear with your customers, partners, suppliers, and those externally around you, and having empowerment down in all of the roles where it needs to be, so that people can then truly own the change and derive the benefit into business as usual running, and then take it on from there. Because quite often in adopting an agile mindset, we need to get to that point where we can deliver something good enough as a viable product and then refine it from there, and having a set of roles and responsibilities that allows you then to empower those folk to get on and help the delivery ongoing from there is really, really powerful, and helps you to have a multiplier effect on being able to achieve benefits, because there's another delivery team there latent, ready, waiting to go on and deliver some more benefit for you. And the final point around the agile mindset, so to be able to adopt that clarity of thought around being responsive to what's going on externally and internally, and build your internal capability to make changes and do so in an agile manner, is really important, and it's really key to recognising value that may otherwise get overlooked in more classical delivery scenarios. So we observe that by adopting those techniques, it does require moving away from some more traditional methods, letting go a little in some aspects, but also getting a bit more insight in the context of business architecture, but empowering the team, and that will help then deliver joined up outcomes. So by adopting those techniques, we've seen our clients be able to deliver in very challenging environments and at very high pace. So we've helped them to deliver those joined up outcomes, and it's largely been down to a combination of those factors that we've just described. We think that those are really important to take forward to increase the likelihood of achieving benefits and achieving success for your organisation, and doing so at extreme pace, which is what's required today.
Okay, so in our experience, we typically help clients take these techniques to help them deliver at pace. And what we find is that we can help our clients translate that business intent into effective change programs, and we typically do that in 3 areas. So firstly, we take business architecture. We help clients quickly design and establish the set of interventions required to achieve the outcomes that are required. We help our clients through managing that transformation, so understanding those drivers, what is required for effective change, helping to design those change programs and implement them and stay the course to ensure that the outcome is delivered. And finally, we can help with the products and services. So taking that digital and customer-centric approach to requirements and solution design, and ensuring that that's fed through your delivery cycles. We hope that the conversation so far has stimulated some of your own thoughts on where you are on your change programs, and given some thoughts about how you might be able to deliver at pace. If there are any questions that you've got, like any sort of advice in terms of those challenges, then do please reach out to either myself or Will.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for your time, everyone. We hope you found something interesting in amongst those thoughts, and yeah, we think that those techniques are what will serve best for securing outcomes in the short term. Thank you.